What if leaving Earth was just the beginning? For so long, we've seen space as a destination, a new home out there among the stars. But what if it's not the place that will change, but us? The moment a human is conceived and born in space, something that has yet happened, yet a new chapter in our story could begin. A chapter that might see us become a different kind of human, forged in the vacuum of the cosmos. This isn't a guarantee, but it is a fascinating, and maybe even plausible, future for human evolution. And it all starts with a single, hypothetical heartbeat in zero gravity. The problem, the hostile cradle of space, our planet, for all its chaos, is a remarkably gentle cradle. For millions of years, every piece of our biology has been shaped by one constant, unwavering force: Earth's gravity. It's the silent partner in our evolution, telling our bones how strong they need to be, our hearts how hard to pump, and even teaching our brains which way is down. In space, that partner is gone. The first and most profound problem for a life beginning in space is the near absence of gravity. It's a fundamental rewriting of the rules of biology. For an adult astronaut, the effects are well documented and severe. Their muscles weaken, their bones lose density, and a whole cascade of physiological changes ripple through their body. But for a fetus, for a child developing without this constant pressure, the consequences could be far more transformative. Their entire musculoskeletal system would form under a different set of laws. There just wouldn't be a need for the robust, load-bearing structure of an earthbound human. The second problem is an invisible, relentless assault: radiation. Earth's magnetic field and atmosphere act like a planetary shield, deflecting the vast majority of harmful cosmic and solar radiation. Beyond this shield, radiation levels are dramatically higher. This isn't just about a long-term risk of cancer. This radiation can directly damage DNA. For an adult, the body has repair mechanisms, but for a developing embryo and a growing child, this constant bombardment of high-energy particles presents a profound threat. So far, studies on the reproductive health of animals in space are in their early stages, but they show that radiation and microgravity can disrupt reproductive processes. In essence, the cradle of space is hostile. It's a combination of a missing fundamental force and the presence of a destructive one, creating environmental pressures so extreme that the human body as we know it simply is unbuilt to be born into it. The consequences: rewriting the human blueprint. So what might a human born under these conditions actually be like? The answer lies in the difference between temporary adaptation and permanent development. When an astronaut like Scott Kelly spends a year in space, his body undergoes dramatic changes. NASA's landmark twin study, which compared him to his identical brother Mark on Earth, gave us an unprecedented look at this process. Scott experienced changes in his gene expression, and while most of these changes, around 91%, reverted to normal after he returned to Earth, a small subset persisted, hinting at the deep and lasting impact of the space environment. Now, imagine these aren't temporary changes in an adult, but the starting point for a developing child. Let's start with the skeleton. On Earth, our bones are constantly remodeling in response to the stress of gravity. Without that stress, bone loss accelerates, with astronauts losing 1% to 1.5% of their bone density per month in certain bones. A child born in space would likely develop a much lighter, more fragile skeleton, because it was never signaled to become strong. They might grow taller, their spine elongating without gravity's compression, but their bones could be all suited for the crushing pressure of Earth. Their muscles would follow a similar path. The powerful anti-gravity muscles in our legs and back would have little purpose. Even with the intensive exercise that astronauts rely on, a native space dweller would likely develop a fundamentally different musculature, one built for precise, low-force movements in 3 dimensions, not for powerful locomotion against a constant downward pull. The cardiovascular system would also be Here on Earth, your heart works tirelessly to pump blood up to your brain against gravity. In space, that's not an issue. Bodily fluids shift upwards, causing the puffy face and head congestion astronauts often report. A heart that develops in this environment wouldn't need to be nearly as powerful. Over time, the heart muscle would likely be smaller and weaker, perfectly adapted for a weightless life, but dangerously inadequate for a return to a gravity well. And it's not just muscles and bones. The very way their brain processes reality would be different. Our sense of balance, our innate knowledge of where our limbs are or calibrated to gravity. The neurovestibular system of a spaceborne human would be wired for a 3-dimensional world, with no up or down. While this might make them incredibly adept at navigating complex zero-G environments, it would leave them profoundly disoriented on a planet with gravity. Even their vision could be permanently altered, a condition known as space flight-associated neuroocular syndrome, or SANS, affects many astronauts, where fluid shifts increase pressure in the head and can physically deform the eyeball, leading to blurry vision. For someone born into this, it might be their version of normal. Finally, there's the immune system. A mix of microgravity and radiation exposure has been shown to alter immune function in astronauts. A child born in space would grow up in a sterile, confined environment, which could further shape their immune responses in unpredictable ways. The sum of all these consequences is a human who is exquisitely, but perhaps irreversibly, adapted to space. The generational shift. From adaptation to evolution, the changes we see in a single astronaut are what biologists call phenotypic plasticity, temporary adjustments the body makes. But when these environmental pressures persist over generations, something more profound can happen. For a new, distinct species to emerge, two key ingredients are required: intense selective pressure and genetic isolation. A permanent space colony provides both. The selective pressures are the harsh realities we've already discussed. In the first generations of spaceborne humans, survival and reproduction might favor certain traits. Perhaps individuals with a natural resistance to radiation would have healthier children. Maybe those whose bodies are better at retaining calcium would have an advantage. Over a very long time, these traits could become more common. At the same time, the vastness of space is the ultimate form of genetic isolation. A colony on Mars or orbiting Jupiter would be almost completely cut off from Earth's gene pool. This separation is a key driver of It's how new species have always formed on Earth. A population gets separated by an ocean or a mountain range, and over immense time. On Earth, this process for mammals can take hundreds of thousands or even millions of years, while the extreme pressures of space could theoretically be a powerful catalyst for change. Seeing a truly new human species would likely be a process of many thousands of years. Still, you can imagine a tipping point far in the future. A generation could be born that is so perfectly adapted to microgravity that their bodies can no longer handle the crushing force of 1G. Their bones might be too brittle, their hearts too weak, their sense of balance utterly overwhelmed. At that moment, they would be biologically bound to their off-world home. A return to the planet of their ancestors could be a death sentence. There would be a new branch of humanity, forever separated from Earth. This is the point where science fiction starts to feel very real. The idea of a human who cannot set foot on Earth is a profound one. What do you think that moment would mean for humanity? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you're finding this journey into our evolutionary future fascinating, take a moment to subscribe and hit the like button. It helps us continue to explore these big ideas. A new species, so what might this new human, this Homo caelestis, or celestial human, look like? Based on these evolutionary pressures, we can speculate about a new human form, one that might seem alien to us. They would likely be taller and more slender, with elongated limbs, freed from the compressive force of gravity. Their musculature would probably be lean, with less bulk in the lower body and more developed upper body strength, optimized for getting around in 3D space. Their heads might be proportioned differently to accommodate a brain wired for complex spatial reasoning, and a vestibular system that has completely abandoned the concept of up. Their cardiovascular systems would be models of efficiency, not raw power. But let's be realistic. Evolution probably won't be left to chance. It will likely become a technological process. It's hard to imagine humanity would leave such a critical process to natural selection alone. This is where direct biological intervention could come in. Gene editing technologies like CRISPR could become standard, used to accelerate the adaptations needed for survival. Why wait for generations for radiation resistance to evolve naturally? If you can insert genes that help protect and repair DNA, why risk bone density loss when you might be able to engineer bones to maintain their mass without gravity? This leads to a fork in the evolutionary road. One path is natural, a slow divergence driven by the raw pressures of the cosmos. The other is engineered, a rapid, deliberate reshaping of our own biology to conquer a new frontier. Most likely, the future will be a mix of both. Natural selection will still favor certain traits, but our descendants will have the tools to guide that process. They won't just be adapting to space. They might be redesigning themselves for it. This process, known as directed evolution, could create a human form far more radical than natural selection alone would allow. The humans born in space won't just be a new branch of our species. They might be the first in the history of life on Earth to take a direct hand in their own evolutionary destiny. The philosophical frontier, the possible emergence of Homo calastis, forces us to ask a question that cuts to the core of our identity. What does it mean to be human? If a branch of our descendants can no longer survive on the planet that birthed us, are they still human? If their very DNA has been deliberately altered, where do you draw the line between human and something else? This isn't just a biological question, it's a profound philosophical one. For all of our history, humanity has been synonymous with humanity of Earth. The colonization of space could shatter that definition. We'd be faced with a diaspora that isn't just cultural, but biological. The people of Earth and the people of the stars could look at each other with a mixture of wonder, envy, and maybe even fear. Would we see them as our children, the next step in our great journey? Or would we see them as a species whose experiences are so fundamentally different that common ground is hard to find? History on Earth provides some cautionary tales. When separated groups of humans meet, it can lead to conflict born from misunderstanding. Now, imagine the differences aren't just in culture, but in the variability to inhabit the same physical space. But on the other hand, the existence of a Homo calastis could be a unifying force for everyone left on Earth. Faced with a truly different kind of human, our own terrestrial squabbles might seem pretty small by comparison. It could force us to see ourselves as one people, the people of the cradle. Earthbound humans, defined by our shared gravity and our shared past. The future of humanity might be a story of divergence. Just as early humans spread across the globe and our descendants could spread across the solar system, adapting and changing along the way. The journey to the stars is so much more than an engineering challenge. It is a biological one. The moment we create permanent self-sustaining populations off-world, we could trigger the next phase of our own evolution. The harsh environment of space, with its lack of gravity and relentless radiation, would act as a cosmic forge, potentially shaping our descendants into a form we might barely recognize. Through a combination of natural adaptation over millennia and direct technological intervention, a new kind of human could emerge, one taller, perhaps more fragile, and irrevocably tied to the void. Leaving our home planet isn't just the next step in exploration, it's a potential next step in our very being. The future of humanity isn't a single path, but a branching tree, with its roots firmly planted on Earth, and its newest branches reaching out into the silent darkness of space. Our evolution isn't over. It might just be getting started.